open for business on eaglenewslive.com, and with me is the Group CEO and Chairman of the Eastern Petroleum Group Corporation. Thank you for coming, sir.
Thank you very much, Cesar, for this invitation, and I'm very happy to be here.
Okay. Sir, the topic, of course, is how businesses impact, how businesses are impacted on the oil price hikes. But before we go on into that levels or into the discussion, can you walk us through on how the import of oil is, and then after that, what's the actual dynamics once we get it from our sources and it's imported and it goes to the refineries in the Philippines? And what are the various petroleum products that are marketed here in the Philippines?
Okay, Cesar. Briefly, our country is 99.8% dependent on international oil.
So
We
1% is only produced.
0.2%
Oh,
is produced.
Okay.
We consume around 450,000 barrels of oil every day, which is already almost 50% more than 3 years ago. And that is equivalent to 70 million liters every single day.
Wow.
That is how much we burn. And we import either crude or finished product. Finished product means gasoline, diesel, lubricant, fuel oil, and liquefied petroleum gas, and jet fuel. So
But which of the two, sir, of the finished product and crude, which in terms of percentage?
it's almost 50-50. In other words, our refining capacity is only around, we have only 2 refiners left. That's, I think, Petron and the other one, Shell. And they can only manage to produce half of the finished product. The rest are like us. We import the Independent Petroleum Association, for example, and the other independents now constitutes almost 40%. And that is what we represent as far as, importing primarily diesel, which is 40% of the total market.
Okay.
25%, which is gasoline, the gasoline that you and I, around 11% of the liquefied petroleum gas for cooking oil, for cooking, I mean, and jet fuel, and some lubricants.
Okay.
So these are the principal finished product which our local refineries also produces, but inadequately.
So when you say inadequately, sir, is there a demand for more refineries? What's your course of action?
What we're saying is there is a room for additional refinery capacity, because unlike, for example, our neighbors like Taiwan, they have more than sufficient, like Singapore and even Korea. And these are the source of what we call finished products that principally imported by the independent petroleum players, including existing players, because if it is inadequate, if their current production is not sufficient, they are also forced to import, or if there is a better pricing for the finished product, so to speak.
So if there are price movements, sir, has there been a time where it happened that only crude oil increased prices and finished products remain the same, or?
The dynamics in the price is, if you are a refiner, we are using what you call a Dubai reference point for crude. Okay. When you are, however, a product importer like us, we call it mean of Platts. What is the average of Platts? It is a transaction that happens every day and used as a reference point. And in our case, the price referencing happens every week, because if we do it every day, it will be so confusing. And also, remember that we have a transport sector whose fare is regulated. So there's this is what sometimes very confusing for some people. And so there was an agreement, like a gentleman's agreement years ago during the time of the late Secretary Reyes, that why don't we just do it on a weekly basis so that at least our jeepney drivers, the transport sector can prepare. Because if you do it on a monthly basis like before, and there's a build-up, remember, there's a build-up of price, there's a tendency for people to hoard.
Correct.
And in the case, however, if it is going down, there is a shortage because nobody wants to import anymore.
Correct.
So,
but is there a minimum requirement of inventory that you have?
Under the law, there is supposed to be at least a 15-day inventory. But at the end of the day, it's market forces. When in 1998, when the oil industry was deregulated, in other words, it's market forces principally. And there is always that dictum that when it is market forces, let the market dictate what you call equilibrium price. Right? Now, nobody will price it so low that the tendency for that price leader is to run out of stocks because everybody will gang on him.
Correct.
And you cannot also price too high because, people will not go to your station. And it is happening now. Because with more than 200 brands in the market, you can see that in this part of Metro Manila, there is so much competition and that the price difference, for example, in our Pasig stations, the price is 41.50 for diesel. But if you go by EDSA, the lowest you can get is 44.50. So there's a 3 pesos differential.
Which is very high.
Which is very high. However, you have to take note that the cost of doing business in Makati is a lot higher than probably where my stations are.
Correct.
And even if, for example, in Davao, we have the lowest in the entire Davao region, it's our strategy. But so it is, at the end of the day, it is the market that will dictate. It's up to you.
Yes, sir. But going back, sir, to what you mentioned in terms of price referencing, you said before it was every month, then every week instead of day to day. So
day-to-day.
Is this,
It never happened, by the way.
Okay.
But
is this a standard, the weekly price referencing
for the Philippines?
For the Philippines.
But for other countries,
yes.
other countries in the US, it's every day.
Oh.
It's every day.
I
You
see.
can see a station even in the middle of the day changing their price.
I see.
But do we want it? Do we want it? And sometimes it's also happening because when the other station changes its price, you can see the other one already changing.
Okay, that's right. That's right.
But at the end of the day, as we said, we are okay because at least every Monday, you can note that every Monday, whatever is the difference between the price a week before and the price immediately after, in other words, we deduct or subtract, and whatever is the average, that is the price referencing which happens. Now, the Cesar, you will always ask, some people will say, is it not a cartel? Because why do you announce at the same time?
Exactly.
Well, the issue is one, it is really a verifiable number. When you say Minoplatz, of which the Department of Energy is Minoplatz Singapore. In other words, Singapore Platz is also monitored by the Department of Energy. But we cannot reveal it because it is proprietary.
But
you have to pay for the.
You cannot reveal it, but you said it's verifiable. So how do you?
Well, it is verifiable with the people who are subscribing to it.
I see.
In other words,
so for you to get it's transparent in the sense that if someone wants it, they have to subscribe.
You have to subscribe.
Okay.
With DOE, and we were even saying that Congress should see also. So other than the Department of Energy, in other words, transparency is there. And you cannot say that, hey, there was connivance. How can there be connivance for more than 200 companies? We are not going to connive with each other with respect to pricing, except that that there was already an announcement of, say, 30 centavos or 35. Sometimes we tend to be an aggressor, I mean, in terms of pricing, and say, hey, I'll price mine 5 centavos for goodwill. But at the end of the day, at the market, at the level of the trading floor, at the trading era, there is almost an independent decision on the part of the dealers. Remember, dealers are independent entrepreneurs.
Exactly.
And they may decide and say, hey, I want to get a bigger share of this market. Why don't I be pricing it 1 peso to as much as 3 pesos lower? And that is his strategy. And it's up to his neighboring stations if they're willing to match. If they match, so there's an equilibrium price. If they can lower it further, fine, until to a point that you can really lower it, and then you're the price leader. And which, of course, you expect to attract a lot of these customers.
Yeah, but as you mentioned, a regular viewer or a regular consumer would think that cartel is existing because of the timing that you do
Cesar, 30 years of propaganda in the streets, and I was part of it.
Okay.
You always say, this is big business, this is oil business, you're a cartel. That thing is passé already.
Okay.
At the end of the day, how can there be a cartel when more than 200 players are around? What we are trying to guard now is to ensure that there's a level playing field. What is a level playing field? Level playing field means that, one, everybody abides by the tax rules. You pay the VAT, you pay the import tax. Because if somebody is not playing by the rules, then he has an undue advantage.
Correct.
Just like in all other industry, whether it is in tobacco, whether it is highly taxed and highly regulated product, for example. That must really be, and that is the task of the Bureau of Customs and the Department of Finance, and that's a Herculean task, really. Because when somebody can import at less, tax or less impositions, then he's got the advantage. And that is an undue advantage.
Yes. And what's the status now of that aspect of the business in terms of making sure that everyone is following the tax rules and nobody is given that undue advantage?
Well, at the start of this administration, we were invited for a deliberation on what you call fuel markings.
Meaning the whole industry,
the whole
the
industry.
200 brands.
Yeah.
Okay.
In other words, there has been a pending. This is pending. This has been proposed 8-10 years ago, even the Macapagal administration, which means that all importations must have a marker, a fuel marker, that will determine whether you are paid or not, and to what extent. And now I understand that there was a terms of reference. That's the latest. They have defined the terms of reference, and there were proponents who ultimately will be selected, and this is derived from the practice made in several countries. Because, for example, in Europe, heating oil is subsidized. I don't know until now. In other words, some of this subsidized fuel are smuggled out and sold as a regular fuel.
Smuggled out to where? To the same community?
To the market that is supposed to be paid.
Okay.
So in our case, for example, if you import diesel and you did not pay what is due for a specific tax and the VAT, can you imagine 12%? Even on the presumption that you save half, So if your landed cost is 36 pesos and 12% of that's around 4 pesos. So 4 pesos. And you assume that, for example, that 2 pesos you will have an advantage, then you can price it competitively lower than some of your competitors. It is no longer a play on your margin, but you can do it because you didn't pay the cash. So the government rightly said that, okay, once and for all, we're going to do it, because in the entire 2 administrations, never happened. They just had an experiment, but and I was very active in participating, because I said, hey, that is an even playing field. Because, for example, there were some accusations before that's in the independent that are practicing this type. I said, well, you can carefully review the laws and the taxes. The cases already filed, and you will know, and you will see to your surprise that those facing charges with convictions are those in the major.
Okay.
Surprise, surprise.
Okay. So, sir, before we go into those details, what's the status now of that meeting? Immediately after the meeting, when you were called,
Yeah.
it was implemented.
Well, it is undergoing implementation. So the
Okay.
Department of Budget and Management's Procurement Office, in cooperation with, I guess, with the Bureau of Customs and the Department of Finance, I understand, are in the process of final selection. Now, I don't know. I was after that first meeting a few months ago, I was never consulted again, and I guess they know already. I mean, there are a number of preference to start it with, and I committed during that meeting on behalf of my association that we are fully cooperating, and we never heard after that.
It's an exciting discussion with the group CEO and chairman of the Eastern Petroleum Group, Dr. Martinez. We'll be right back. Stick with us. We are back. We are open for business here on EagleNewsLive.com. Let's continue our discussion with Mr. Fernando L. Martinez, the chairman and CEO of the Eastern Petroleum Group. Sir, you provided a lot of details earlier, and my next question is, if there are oil price hikes in other parts in the world market, how are you affected? Example, there's this OPEC news with the Iran news, because it's the interplay of geopolitical stability.
Yeah.
How are you impacted by this issue, sir?
Well, the impact, as you see, is immediate. It is just that there is what we call a 1 week summation.
Okay.
So every day, for example, between Monday and Friday, if the average last week is higher than the previous week, and the difference is around 35 to 50 centavos, that means to say around $1 per barrel. That is the conversion.
Okay.
Then, midnight Monday, that is announced that this was the movement of crude and the finished product. By the way, people sometimes confuses crude and the finished product. There is a difference.
Which is exactly what I asked earlier.
There is a difference, what you call a refining margin.
Okay.
Because
what's that margin?
It depends on the time, it depends on the area. For example, there are times when the refining margin was as low as $6, but now it goes as high as 10 to 12.
Wow.
Because when there are less refinery capacities, so the tendency for the refiners is to maximize the possible pricing that they can pass on wholesale to their importers.
Is that also regulated?
No, it's free
so
market. Remember, there is no regulated market in the world, except probably in Venezuela, which is government, and I don't know where else. Because in the entire world, it's only the government-owned, which you may say they regulate, but at the end of the day, it's based on market forces in the world. So, who are the principal exporters? The principal exporters, of course, with more than 10 million barrels a day. Remember, we only consume 450,000 a day, barrels a day. The entire world supplies and consumes around 80 million barrels single day. So we are just a very, very small fraction.
Market.
So when there were people before, this is in the past, not today, will say, hey, we'll organize and just demand that. We were laughing and said, who are you to demand? You're minuscule, you know?
Yes.
So the world will never, we are insignificant market as far as oil is concerned. And so, we have to contend with what is the world market. And we are just, as a player, of course, we would like to source where it is the possible cheapest. So, in which Saudi Arabia is number one supplier. There is also other Middle East countries. And what is significant now is 6% of the latest supply is coming now from Russia.
Okay.
So, The others are very small fractions.
How are we affected by the news with Iran, sir? Are we is Iran also our source?
Well, I think in last year there was no mention, very small fraction from Iran,
I see.
and because of the embargo. Remember, the
Okay.
Iran market has been embargoed way back, and so for some reasons our two refiners, Petron and Shell, we never sourced it from there. Maybe before. But for the finished product, however, we are all only sourcing from regional sources, and these are principally either Formosa, that is
Okay.
Taiwan,
Yes.
Caltex, not Caltex, I mean Korea, and most probably Australia, and even what is this? Our neighbor, no?
Okay.
So
In the ASEAN.
In the ASEAN. Oh.
Sir, before we go
Singapore,
into
I mean, yeah.
before we go into the discussion on your business with Russia, which is also very exciting, I would just
Yeah.
like to ask, sir, before we leave the discussion on oil, how would the government and you in the private sector cushion the impact of oil price hikes? Is there a way that the government and the private sector like you, especially the independent players like you, somehow cushion its impact to the businesses?
Well, the principal contribution that we may say of the private sector who entered the oil regulation is to provide intense competition. In the just 2 years after the oil regulation, National Power Corporation testified, that they saved 20%.
Wow.
So can you imagine where they used to spend so much on the same, they said, wow. Can you imagine what happened? And the same thing with other government entities that used to source it from one company because it's government owned. You cannot say that it is because government owned it's efficient. Number
That's
two,
right.
there's no corruption. In fact, there's so much corruption. So, to me, with the president's central, theme of curbing corruption, the better you privatize. Kung pwede nga, even the BIR, you privatized. So
Okay.
that efficiency can be done. So how can we cushion? Well, at the end of the day, by sourcing the best competitive price in the market and passing it on. By being the most efficient player as we can. And that is the contribution of any private entity, whether you're in broadcast, whether you are in food. And I think that is the ultimate goal of a private enterprise. And, abide by the rules. Otherwise, if you're trying to outwit everybody by not playing by the rules, then that's not fair.
Okay. Well said, sir. Now, shifting to your other business, it's we have a very exciting relationship with Russia now. Never before,
True.
have we seen a foreign relationship between the Philippines and Russia, and than it is now. Well, how is it doing business with Russia? Because I know that you are now the exclusive distributor in the Philippines of a Russian motor brand.
Yeah.
Can you describe that relationship with the Russian businessmen, sir?
At the start of the Duterte administration, he has declared that he's open for business.
Okay.
And therefore, it materialized in May 23 last year.
Okay.
Which unfortunately was abruptly called back and shortened because of what happened in Marawi.
Marawi, correct.
But the economic team were there. I joined him also in Peru for the other year, 2017, and so the dynamics, between him and the President Putin, and you can see that the personal rapport between two leaders, just like, and I hope that they will hit it off again with Trump and President Putin, because at the end of the day, the leaders of two countries will ultimately send a signal to everybody. And so when I heard that he's going there, and there were advanced team, and kudos to our Department of Trade and Industry who paved the way. There were advanced teams who came over. What are the products we can sell to Russia, and what can we import from Russia? And hello, I didn't realize that they produce good brands of trucks, of vans, and which is just in timing because we are having this public transport modernization. And so it opened up a lot. 1 month before we left for Moscow, we already had an understanding with my counterpart. And so when I went there in May and then came back in September, there was already an agreement.
Perfect.
And so, it fits well. And I said,
sir, I just have to cut you there. I noticed, sir, that somehow you are a game changer in the sense that you initiated a lot of innovations in the oil industry, being an independent petroleum producer, and now you are coming up with a Russian brand. Again, you are trying to change the rules of the game, and you are going to compete with more popular brands in the Philippines. So what's your strategy? What do you think would be the market acceptance of this Russian brand?
Well, Cesar, we are very happy with the reception. We launched it in March and then launched it again last April. And the reception was tremendous because they were offering some trucks, some vehicles that has never been seen, and with features that are not available. For example, have you seen a service vehicle that can be used for police, military, for, not the ones being controversial, I don't want to mention any name, but self-inflating, it can run through 4 feet of water. I mean, these are fantastic. And for our public modernization, for utility, air conditioning, can sit 20 to 30. And so I said, this is a perfect opportunity. And my Russian counterpart saw it also. And I said, the president wants to change 300 to 400,000 units in the next 4 years. Because you can see, and I am a jeepney rider for 20 years, Cesar. And I know how it feels to ride. and I said, wow, we had been through. And it's time to change. And if we can contribute in that, and the Department of Transportation saw it, we constantly, and we are in constant touch also with the Federation of Jeepney Drivers, UB Express, and they're happy with what they see.
Okay, sir, you mentioned that there's a lot of features in these motor vehicles and a lot of new innovations. What about the price, sir? Is it acceptable in terms of price, points?
The price is just like any Korean or Japanese. It's the same. At the end of the day, what we would like to do is to create the business model that will assure and that will assist the operators to say, hey, this is financeable, this is viable. And I get this is the extra service that we would like to do to our transport operators, just like yesterday. We're trying to pinpoint what are the routes that this will fit. What are the routes that it won't fit. Honestly, if it is 10 peso fare, it cannot fit. Because I said it has to be a 40 to 50 peso P2P, something like that. And it is viable. So, on the other hand, on the Russian side, they need so much food imports.
Oh, I see. So that's in terms of food, sir. In terms of
food,
agricultural,
fishing, they need marine products.
Okay, sir. Before we go onto a break, so that's my next question. Okay. You are trying to encourage trade in the Philippines. You started with the motor industry,
right?
So, what other potential industries is good to further the trade and investments between the two countries?
Well, I am encouraging our exporters to join and explore. It's not my business anymore. I just want to refer to them to the right marketing channel in Russia.
And what industries are these, sir?
Agriculture-based, marine, and basically it's food consumption. Basically food consumption. Karijinan, don't be surprised. We have been exporting the, you call it carigina. What's the international name? No, as that's the seaweed.
The seaweed.
Oh,
Yes,
so
sir.
in other words, out of their 200 billion imports, around half of it are food, and they export 400 billion.
Wow.
It's a $1 trillion economy. Can you imagine all these years we ignored a one
Yes.
trillion economy with 140 million people? And that's why they're saying, the ambassador, a very good guy, His Excellency Igor, says, we have 140,000 Russian tourists in Thailand. Philippines, 40,000. You have so
there's
much to
huge gap.
offer.
Exactly.
And the Russians spend an average of $1,000 every single day. And they stay 2 weeks.
Wow.
Can you imagine? Even with 100,000, with 1,000, that's $100 million
Wow.
every single day. So these are the opportunities, Cesar and our friends. And I hope that's why we're saying that we should really spend more time knowing each other, having cultural exchanges, and familiarizing ourselves with the Russian economy and the Russian people. And on the other side, the forthcoming summit of President Trump and President Putin.
That's going to
we
be
are
very
in 16,
interesting
and
as
we are
well.
hoping when we're praying that they should hit it off, because the U.S. economy has much more to offer to Russia, because
That is
Russia
right.
cannot export much because they have, U.S. is also an oil exporter
That's
now,
right.
but Russia, they have so much to import from, from the U.S. and therefore, from the point of view of international trade, they have more to gain if they will be friends.
Let's leave the Russians for now, sir. Open for Business will be back. You're still watching here on EagleNewsLive.com. Stay with us. You are watching Open for Business on EagleNewsLive.com. This is Cesar Vallejos, and with me is the Group CEO and Chairman of Eastern Petroleum Group, Mr. Fernando Martinez. Sir, we talked about the oil industry and, of course, the good relationship with Russia. We'll go to your roots this time, sir. Briefly, I learned that you started very young in your as an entrepreneur, and you worked hard for it. You studied hard. You were a working student
I was
based
a
on your
working student.
credentials. You
Yeah.
have a very stellar career as a student and also as an entrepreneur. May we know your secret and your view of social entrepreneurship, which is giving back to the community, sir?
Alam mo, Cesar, we are trying to be involved in power development. And the power development that we would like is, we call it biomass, that involves a number of people who will supply, fast-growing trees. And that's why we are in Butuan, we are in Agusan, Sur. Can you imagine if a power plant will be supplied by farmers? That is renewable. That's renewable. And
Who
we
is investing on it? Your group?
we
sir?
have a group that,
okay.
the only thing that happened, however, is the snags. And the snags is with respect to, for example, land use conversion.
Okay.
And the land use,
Okay.
and a lot of these business people, it's not the environment issue because this is pro-environment. But when you convert a particular idle land into a power plant, you need a conversion. And you know where it is snag? It's not in the Department of Agrarian Reform, but it is Department of Agriculture at the central that is supposed to just endorse.
I see.
Amazingly. So, a several hundred million amount, with thousands of people, trying to do it, hit a snag simply because
Of the conversion.
because of the now.
Is there a workaround?
Well, I am not a compromising with respect to certain suggestions.
Okay.
And that is why I said, okay, I will just leave. I will just wait when you feel that it is, But other than that, there are a number of social entrepreneurship, and that for example, I have my friend who is in microcredit, and we're trying to say, hey, when you start organizing people, number one is educate them. Education is so powerful.
Correct.
At the end of the day, if you do not educate our people, no matter how much billions you put it in. Remember, I work for government. I worked for 20 years. We conceive, even at the time, some of the self-help, loan program, etc., agriculture, agrarian reform. But at the end of the day, when they see it as a dole out, forget it.
Yes.
You are just wasting good money after bad. So, education is key. And of course, at the end of the day, there must be integration. There must be market support. It is not just a matter of picture.
Yes.
launching.
And they do it for, lip
and
service.
Then, and lip service, and then get a donation somewhere.
Correct.
I'm not against those guys who manage to get some grants, etc. But what I'm saying, what is the issue of sustainability? The issue of really making sure that when he started 5 years ago, he is below poverty line. And after 5 years, you can now categorize him as above the poverty line. What are these lines of business that must be attached? In other words, the big brother and the supply. The supply chain is very important. For example, if we need this kind of raw materials, and I'm telling you about a power plant, I need the raw material. I need every kilo. I need 6,000 kilos. No, I need around 500 tons. That's 500,000 kilos of feedstock every single day. So, if I buy at 1 peso per kilo, some of these branches, some of these twigs, these are, these are not important. All you have to do is to plant ipil-ipil. And after 2 years, cut it. After that, you can have one family earn 80,000 every hectare.
But in your company now, sir, is there a thrust to go into sustainability? Because a lot of the companies now, of course, they are no longer measured with the P&L sheets, but with the sustainability reports. So what's your specific activities on environment, social governance?
We have certain guidelines because you want to be achieve certain level of sustainability. And for example, in Eastern Petroleum, we say, hey, we are into what you call the most advanced LPG technology. And we're trying to put as many network as possible that does not use any more metal. Have you seen an LPG that is transparent, that saves money? And
I am actually using it, sir.
Thank you so much. So game changer.
Yes.
After 60 years, we'll say enough of those explosions, enough of those fires.
Correct.
And that's what we're doing, no? So sustainability of our networks, sustainability of seeing to it that number one, the business will be there to endure without causing much more resources for the environment. Because when you are sustainable in terms of environment, then you are really here for a long term, and at the same time it is assuring for people. Now the other thing that I am now looking, Cesar, is how do you really ensure that plastics, that we will erase Philippines from being the second worst polluter in the sea. And you know what we found out? This is a revelation I'm going to tell you.
Okay, sir. Hopefully it's exclusive.
Because we banned, incineration.
Oh.
You know the impact? Everybody is doing incineration all over the world. But in this country, somebody, a bright, said that, hey, you cannot do that. It's bad for them. We are doing worse. Because You cannot collect the trash. There's not enough ground. There's not much enough host community where to throw your, now even Laguna Lake is being, that's a controversial issue. But can you imagine?
So what's the plan, sir?
The plan is,
would you have a recommendation to have in incineration back?
I think we have to amend the law.
I
And
see. Correct.
If
We have
you
to amend the law.
if you amend it, then it's easier for cities, for municipalities. Right in the suburban of Tokyo, there's incineration.
Yes.
Right in Singapore, they're incinerate. What are we, special people?
But do you remember the cause why we banned incineration?
Oh well, there are those people who champion the climate change.
I see.
When in fact our footprint in the carbon footprint is too low, and yet these are the people who says, hey, incineration is bad for the world and for us, and they win. They won in the argument. What is the resulting? What is the effect? Well, everybody, you cannot. Plastics is all over.
Exactly.
It's all over. So it's a policy change that had cost after 15 years. You can see the result. Garbage is everywhere, and it's a pity. You go to a different country. You go to Singapore. You go to Hong Kong. You go to other urban countries. Can you imagine? And you go to City of Manila. A very dirty city.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Actually, the rivers.
I live in that city. I
Okay.
grew up in that city. I studied in that city. That's why I almost cry. What happened to this city? And at the end of the day, you cannot blame. Hey, we cannot collect the trash. Where do we put the trash? We have to put it in a barge, put it in another island. So when there's a typhoon, we cannot transfer.
Sir, I think you are forced to come back here in the show to discuss these details. Before you leave, sir, I'll ask you to give your learnings as addressing the CEOs, the chief executive officers in the country, the young entrepreneurs, with your experience, having spent a lot of years in government and having being a game changer in the oil industry. What is it that chief executive officers and entrepreneurs should do to make it in their business, especially with all the challenges happening in the oil and gas market and the transportation sector? Is there still hope for CEOs to thrive?
Oh, of course, no, Cesar. I'm a positive thinker. Number two is there's always a saying that you have to prepare well for yourself. I mean, if you're going to face a certain task, see to it that you're well prepared. And of course, I adhere to that saying always, and it's kept in my mind ever since I'm in college. Is that favorite line of Sir Bernard Shaw, and says, "Some people see things and ask why. I dream of things that never were, and say why not." So, for example, that's my guidance. When we entered the oil industry, it's like an almost impossible task. Who are you
Yes.
to challenge the big
The top three.
And then, when it is LPG, who are you to debunk a 60-year-old technology? And here in the Russian in the Russian vehicle market, I say, who are you to dethrone? I'm not going to dethrone. I'm just offering something new and an alternative that can be better. So I guess all CEOs are, especially the young ones, are very aggressive. The digital age, well, I admire their tenacity. And at the end of the day, you have to have that tenacity. Never say, quit. No, I don't quit. So that may be an
Never a
enduring.
quitter.
Yeah, I'm never a quitter. To a point, however, that sometimes you really have to admit sometimes that there's no point in going on something. But as long as I see hope, I continue.
That's a very exciting discussion. We will not also quit inviting Mr. Fernando Martinez here on the show. I'm sure our guests would love for him to come back and guest again. And we hope that you will continue to check and study his insights on sustainability, because you talked a lot, and you talk a lot of your insights about sustainability, making sure that the people, planet, and profit would come in together,
Yeah.
and would be
They must be
considered
balanced.
balanced, as we say. So, in our business term of the week, you take a refresher of business terms to make you updated, more informed, and ready to make smarter business decisions. And this week's term is stock. Investopedia defines stock, also known as shares and equity, as a type of security that signifies ownership in a corporation and represents a claim on part of the corporation's assets and earnings. There are two main types of stock, common and preferred. Common stock usually entitles the owner to vote at shareholders' meetings and receive dividends. Preferred stockholders generally do not have voting rights, though they have a higher claim on assets and earnings than the common stockholders. For example, owners of preferred stock receive dividends before common shareholders and have priority in the event that a company goes bankrupt and is liquidated. That's it for this week's episode of Open for Business. We end our webisode with a CEO quote for the week. This week's quote is from Warren Buffett, CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. We look for three things when we hire people. We look for intelligence, we look for initiative or energy, and we look for integrity. And if they don't have the latter, the first two will kill you. Join us again next Saturday, 5 p.m. Philippine time, for another episode of Open for Business, where we discuss business information, deliver the latest business news to keep you informed and open for business. You're on eaglenewslive.com. This is Cesar Vallejos. Have a great day.